I'm Karen MacNeil, author of the Wine Bible and editor of the digital newsletter WineSpeed. And this is winespeed.com's People to Know, insider interviews with the most fascinating and important people in the wine business. And today we're talking to Sir Peter Michael. Sir Peter is founder of Peter Michael Winery in the Napa Valley appellation of Sonoma, California. Since it was founded in 1982, the winery has accrued dozens of top awards for its wines. Born in London and trained as an engineer, Peter Michael spent much of his early career as a technology entrepreneur. He founded Micro Consultants Group and UEI PLC and was the driving force behind a group of high-tech companies, including Cosworth Engineering and Quantel, the digital special effects company for television and film production. The graphic arts tool, Paintbox, is just one of the commercial applications his company introduced in its 20 years of operation. In 1992, Peter Michael founded Classic FM, the UK's first national commercial radio station with an audience of 6 million listeners. With his family, he owns the luxury hotel, The Vineyard, in Berkshire, just outside of London. The hotel has one of the largest collections of California wine in Great Britain. Peter Michael became Sir Peter Michael after being knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 1989. Welcome, Sir Peter. It's a pleasure to have you on People to Know.
Well, that was quite an introduction, Karen. Thank you very much. What can I tell you today?
Do you remember the first wine you ever had? How old were you and who gave it to you?
Well, it's my father. And no, I don't remember the first one I had specifically, but there was always wine on the table. And I started, I think, by a little sip of white wine, really. And like many people, gravitated to red wine, from which it's difficult to shift me nowadays, although I've also inherited my father's unfortunate aspect of health in that I'm unable to drink alcohol. I've become allergic to it. So, and he was too. So it's all down to him. We're in the UK, we have no restrictions on drinking alcohol at an early age, providing that it's supervised with parents. And so that's the way I was brought up. I'm not sure I liked it very much. And I don't think I particularly liked being dragged around Bordeaux and Burgundy as I was as a kid every few years to go and taste stuff from the barrels. My father loved it. But eventually I did learn to like it quite a lot.
Yeah. Now you're an Englishman making wines with French names in California. And I understand that through much of your early life, you just loved French wines. But why did you decide to buy land and make wine in California when it seemed like you could have bought a vineyard in France? Closer, you loved those wines. Why California?
Well, yes, indeed. And in fact, Dad was responsible for that too, really, because after World War II, he and a partner went off to France to look around to see whether they could acquire between them a French vineyard. And went several times to Burgundy. They were keen on Burgundy, and so am I. And they found that, like so many have before them, that the way in which Burgundy is broken up into clos by clos and row by row really made it very difficult, certainly in those days, to acquire any contiguous acreship. And so it came back, and they said two things really. It would take 50 years to find 50 acres, and it would also upset all the French. The French didn't really want an Englishman, certainly not then, interfering with what was French wine. It was sacrosanct for the French. So that's why not France. I mean, there's a longer story of why California. Do you want to hear it or not?
Well, you know, let me ask you this to continue the story. I mean, I I imagine that when people, even to this day, people often say to me, oh yes, I know Peter Michael, it's that wonderful wine from the Napa Valley. And I always say it is wonderful wine, but it's not from the Napa Valley. So I'm wondering, when you decided on California, you chose a relatively remote part of Knights Valley. And what was it about that site that just spoke to you?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked that question. How long have we got? So, although it's in Sonoma, the rumor is that many years ago it actually was part of the Napa Valley. And when you look north from the Napa Valley, you see this grand mountain at the head of the valley, and our vineyard is on the western slope of it. And it's pretty clear that in reality it is part of the Napa Valley, nevertheless, wherever the boundary is drawn. So that is irrelevant, and it has actually been voted the best California vineyard, which is extraordinary, really. Never mind. As you said, engineering, I had a wonderful time in the other valley. We talk about the other valley as Silicon Valley, and where everyone, clearly everyone is going mad, and one has to take a break from it and go up to a saner place, the Napa Valley and that region, to get away from the madness of the valley floor. And so I did that every few weekends, just drove up and looked around, and the further north I went, the happier I was, really, because there were fewer people there and there was more land and so on. Yeah. So it had to be within reach of San Francisco. It had to be big. It had to have a project being able to grow grapes on it, and above all, it needed water.
Yes, water, very important. Well, it has always seemed to me that because I've been there and driven around with you, and I can imagine before vineyards were there, this was a huge project, and you strike me as someone who likes a big, meaty, kind of a difficult project.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be that way. It just turned out that way, really. Certainly, I am project motivated. And during this lockdown, if I hadn't got a project on the go, I think I probably would be mad by now. Well, some people think I am anyway, but that's definition, and it goes with the job. So yes, I do like projects, and I like friends who have projects, and I like comparing their projects with my projects and talking about the problems and how to overcome them. There are always millions of them. Right now, the biggest problem we've all got in California is fire and what to do about it. And that is a huge problem and a huge project for all of us to concentrate on.
Yeah, and I know I believe in 2017, one of the promontories at Peter Michael Winery was used by firefighters to watch the progression of the fire, which was very close to you.
Well, I think we've had fire going through for the last 5 years. I'm not sure about that. I mean, fire or smoke, one or the other. And I think it was 19 when we had about 50 fire trucks. They turned up, and about 500 firefighters came on the ranch and did a fantastic job. Altogether, we would be in much worse. We were incredibly lucky, but there again, we had spent for years tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars on fire protection, undergrowth clearing, thinning of the trees, and just providing a good chance of water being available at the point of the fire targets. So we had fire the year after I bought it, in 83 or 84. with, and from then on in is, well, you just have, it seems California is on fire every year somewhere.
Yes, and we're all waiting with great nervousness about what might happen this year after last year's devastating fires. Let me go to your wines for a moment, because I've often wondered this. I mean, we know in the wine industry that people like sort of specialization, but you make 3 Cabernet blends and 4 Pinot Noirs and 2 Sauvignon Blanc Semillon blends and 6 Chardonnays. Not only is it hard to make so many wines, but it's certainly more challenging to market and sell so many different wines. Why did you decide to do that as opposed to just sticking with maybe Cabernet and Chardonnay?
Well, indeed. Well, the foundation of any good cellar is always going to be Cabernet, Sauvignon, and Chardonnay. And so the products, the SKUs, the wines, are built around that fact. Other cepages will appear from time to time and become fashionable, and they will come and they will go. But Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon are the kings of the cellar. So we seek where we can grow the very best of those great varieties. And I think we're probably part of the movement to a vineyard designation, which is quite different from the way that is traditionally done in France. It's presented in the way that you're very familiar with, that the flavors in the wines are in fact produced in the vineyards. The winemaker's job is not to ruin the job that the vineyard has done, and each vineyard has a distinct nose and a distinct mouthfeel, and one seeks to optimize it from the point of view of which rootstocks with which clones and treated and which way, and crushed which way, and then vinified which way. And that is why there is a real limitation on the size of vineyard of the sort that we have in the family, and it's impossible practically to grow it. And in any case, we don't particularly need to or seek to. But because each of these operations I've just mentioned are manicured by hand, and require the attention of the skilled winemakers and assistant winemakers and all of the cellar guys. Because of that, you just have to decide that if you're going to try to make the top wines, which would sit alongside the wines in my cellar in England, and I could put them on the table with my friends and not get laughed at, then you have to sacrifice the idea of being able to expand as big as you'd like. For a start, there's very little more terroir that can be turned into vineyards. And certainly we seek out those little pockets left to enable the growth of the cepage, the varieties, the Pinot Noir, that we can't grow on the home ranch because it's too hot. And thus we have the Seaview estate, which is just in from the Pacific coast, which is cooler.
You know, though, when I think about the mentality of making Cabernet, the mindset of a great Cabernet vintner is kind of different than the mindset of or the mentality of making Pinot Noir. And we might know that to be the case because very few winemakers make both. Most winemakers are either, they either are firmly planted in Pinot Noir territory or in Cabernet territory. But you felt that you could sort of put focus on both of them and understand the mentality of both varieties. Is that right?
Well, you put it in a very interesting way, and I'm not sure I can really respond because, indeed, a couple of years ago, half a dozen of us decided we'd take another trip to refresh our minds about France and Bordeaux, and we were entertained very, very well by the vintners and vignerons of France. And I remember only too well being sat down one night and being told very firmly, with a finger being wagged in my face, that we were doing it all wrong and that it is quite impossible and it shouldn't even be tried to mix the wines from Bordeaux with those of Burgundy. It is either or deux, mais rien les deux. And so from that meeting, it was in fact more than 2 years ago, it was quite a few years ago, that this happened to us. And I remember coming out from that evening and thinking to myself, as I have on many occasions on other projects in the past, I wonder if he's right. And by which time, of course, it was too late to change anything, really. So we just made the most of it. And it turned out, I think the answer is look for yourself.
Yeah, well, yes. The answer is in the wines, isn't it? I mean, I remember tasting your ma danseuse, your my dancer, Pinot Noir, and being as taken with it as I was the very first time I tasted Les Pavots, your Cabernet, your first Cabernet in any case. Now, Sir Peter, you were knighted by Queen Elizabeth, and that must have been an extraordinary honor and an extraordinary experience. I'm wondering, what went through your mind when that was happening?
Oh, gosh, well, it was a very long time ago now. I was 50 at the time. And it is extraordinary, the power that the regal queen has without doing anything. I remember, I don't often shake when I meet people, but when I met the Queen for the first time, I trembled. Not so much at her power, really, because, as you know, in the UK, she has no power, really. But she just is this regal presence that has endured a dozen prime ministers just coming out of World War II and still here now, 95 this next month, I think, in June. June the 21st is her official birthday. And I've met her several times, of course, since then, but that first time, it was something which I guess very few people have the privilege of doing. And I'm sure that everyone who does have the privilege feels the same way in her presence. And of course, it was Midsummer's Day. And this is the day when I was knighted. And I'm a little fellow, and my friends have called me the shortest knight of the year ever since that day.
Well, very funny. Now, lastly, I just want to ask, within your family and people who know you, I I understand that you are, you're known for being very detailed, something of a perfectionist. And I'm wondering how you trained your palate. How did you develop your palate? Or did you come to wine tasting naturally by virtue of those trips traipsing through the cellars of France with your father?
Well, you've probably picked on my weakest point. I never have had, I've never been trained. All the training I have done has come from opening a bottle and tasting it, meeting with friends and tasting with them, and having a reasonable nose. Of course, I think that women actually are better tasters than men, in my observation. And yes, I guess that having just drunk wine forever, I wouldn't say that I've become an expert at all, but I do seem to be able to spot when something is wrong, and if it's with a friend, not to mention it.
A good political policy to have. Well, Sir Peter, thank you.
Wine, this is my homily, that wine is really like the civilized man's Facebook. You sit around a table with half a dozen friends, you open a bottle, they don't have to know you, but by the end of the bottle, you are friends, even if you weren't before you started. So who needs Facebook?
Well, on that, what a beautiful line. Wine is the civilized man's Facebook. All right, we won't tell Mark in Silicon Valley that line, but I think we all know what you mean, and certainly agree that sitting around a table, there's no faster way to become friends than to share a bottle of wine. Sir Peter, thank you for talking with us, and our complete interview with Sir Peter Michael will appear in winespeed.com's People to Know page. Please check it out. I know you're going to really enjoy reading it.